Welcome to Canucks After Dark. Here are your hosts, Parker Hellebuyck and Clay Emo.
Good evening, Vancouver. Welcome back. It is Monday, June 7th, the first show for us in the month of June. I hope you all are well. My name is Parker. You might know me as ParkersPucks. If you're new here, this is Canucks After Dark, our weekly live show that we do here every Monday night at 10 o'clock. As always, I am joined by my wonderful co-host, Canuck Clay Emo. How are you today?
I'm great, Parker. How are you?
I'm pretty good. It is a nice day. Weather got good, and the Canucks didn't lose any spots in the draft lottery, so everything's coming up for us.
And you have 135,000 hit video.
Yeah, that was a wild one, and 2,000 comments with most of them being angry at me. But that's okay. It's a fun time. But yeah.
No, I was happy for you, man. That was pretty cool. That was cool to see it blow up as quickly as it did. And we can probably talk about what your video was when we get to that particular series. But I'm happy for you, and I was excited. I actually saw a viral video happening right before my eyes.
Yeah, so did I. I kept refreshing it, and it kept going up. As always, of course, we see you all in the YouTube chat hanging out. Of course, we read your comments as we go. We see most of them for sure. Of course, if you're watching this later or you miss any part of the show, you can watch it on YouTube, listen to the podcast, all that stuff. The podcast is it's growing a little bit on the audio side, so that's good to see. So thank you everyone who's listening in that form and who's listening live. And if you want to follow us elsewhere other than this show, it's all linked in the description, so you can find it there.
Awesome. I was going to say, you just came from the golf course.
Yep.
I just came from the driving range. So one of us played real golf and one of us played fake golf.
Yep. No, we're getting all practiced up for the big the big Canucks After Dark match potentially later on in the summer. Who knows?
You know, what we should do is we should ask our viewers, our subscribers, our listeners, like someone who's really good, they'd have to be paired with me to make it even, and someone who's not as good paired with you, and we just go. That'd be hilarious. Imagine like a little contest. I don't know who'd enter it to go golfing with us.
Yeah,
that would be fun. Actually,
a little scramble. Yeah, that'd be interesting for sure.
Once people see me hit, they'll be scrambling to the parking lot to try and get out of there.
Yeah, you got to keep your head up out there. And while we are here, of course, we encourage you guys to leave a review over on Apple Podcasts. As always, Lgator92 left a review this week saying, best Canucks podcast out there. As a Canucks fan, you can't get better than this. Two Canucks guys talking about Canucks hockey. Clay and Parker rule. Worth your listen. So thank you very much for that. And if you want your review read out on the show, you can just go over to Apple Podcasts and hit that 5-star button and leave a review.
Awesome. Parker, why don't you stall for a bit? I'm going to make sure that I'm wired and not Wi-Fi.
Sure.
You do your thing.
Sounds good. All right. So lots of stuff did go on this week. Not a ton on the Canucks side. Of course, the only big news of the week was the Canucks not going down in the draft lottery, which of course feels like a win for this group, considering the fact that it has just been year after year of dropping. We're also going to talk about, who the Canucks could potentially go for, whether the Canucks would think of trading that pick, which, Jim Bennings said they were going to be aggressive. So there's definitely something to think about there. We'll talk about the World Championships a little bit. Canada taking the gold medal in that one after losing 3 straight games to start that tournament. We'll do, of course, our regular Don't Do That segment. So I'd start thinking of those now. We'll aim for about 10:30 on those. So about 25 minutes from now. And then, of course, we'll talk about the NHL playoffs with the Habs finishing the sweep of the Jets tonight, which I don't know about you guys. I didn't see coming. Of course, the Avs in Vegas have put a great series together, and the Islanders might be putting an upset together here as well in front of our very eyes. And Clay's back, so let's start with talking about a stream we did on Wednesday. This last Wednesday, we sort of had a Canucks Before Dark stream. We were going to co-stream it. Clay had some technical issues with my phone video not working great and people not being able to hear me. But
Parker, I am a technical issue. I think that's the problem.
But we had a fun stream where we watched the draft lottery live. We had a good stream. We had lots of people turn up for that. And I was saying it's kind of a win. The Canucks didn't drop in the draft lottery this year.
Yeah, we had such good and noble plans, as we always do, to hang out and to stream simultaneously. I got all excited. We even met early, and then as time got closer to the actual start, you remained composed. I remained composed because I didn't know what I was doing. Actually, you were doing all the work, and then I was happy that we were just combined on one of our streams. That made the most sense. And then we were combined. We were together to watch basically nothing. 15, 14, 13, 12, 11, 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, all
everyone
as
in order.
Expected.
Everyone in order until the Kraken jumped up one spot, and that was it. It was literally the only thing that happened in the entire draft lottery. We just watched Bill Daly just flip cards of the teams in order. Nothing super exciting, but it looks like at the top of the draft, Owen Power, sorry to his career in advance, going to the Buffalo Sabres. That is, it's unfortunate for him. I remember, 2015, when Edmonton won the draft lottery, and then they had McDavid on the video call, and he just looked so sad. And, you kind of feel the same thing here, where it's like these two teams, kind of a disaster.
Imagine if Owen Power just completely duffed the World Championships after that, just so he might go to Seattle instead.
Just try to tank his stock, or he could just say, I'm not playing for you guys. I want to go to Seattle.
No, that's true.
But,
and I know we might talk about who the Canucks might get, but when you saw the card flip at 9, Parker, as we both did at the same time, were you more of an emotion of, oh good, we didn't drop? Was that more than, oh dang, I wish we jumped up? Or what was your prevailing emotion?
So this is what happens to me every time in the draft lottery. The week leading up to it, I'm like, nothing's gonna happen. And then the day of it, I'm like, well, what if? Right? It's like when you whenever you go buy a real lottery ticket, and it's like, all right, I've got like 1 in 20 million chance of winning $50 million. And then you just spend the day daydreaming about the house you're going to have and like the trips you're going to go on. And it never happens. And it was sort of the same idea here, right? Where you're like, man, Owen Power, you think of that, like that would really shore up the blue line, a real potential, D-man to go along with Quinn Hughes. And then you think, and then of course it doesn't happen. But during the draft lottery, as the cards get flipped up, and we saw that 10 through 15 or 16 or whatever didn't change, right? I guess 15 because Arizona doesn't have a pick. 10 through 15 didn't change, and then we got to 9, and I was like, well, the Canucks can't drop, right? Worst case they show up, and they did, and I was kind of like, meh, that's about what we thought would happen. It was the most likely outcome.
Yeah, so it sounds like you weren't disappointed. Obviously we both would have loved a lottery win, but in the end, it's where they were supposed to be, I guess, and that's what we got to live with.
Yeah, no, I wasn't heartbroken or anything. It was just like, darn, which is,
That's what I said too, darn. So, are you of the mind that the 4 defensemen will be gone by the time the Canucks pick, i.e., whatever order it is, Power, Hughes, Clark, and Edvinsson?
Probably. I mean, I think you're gonna have at least 2 of them going in the top 4, and then of course everyone's just penciling in Luke Hughes to the Devils, right? Because Jack's there now. If you are the Devils, I mean, I don't think you should put too much stock into him being one of your player's brother, right? At the end of the day, like if there's a player who you think is going to be a better player, I think you'd be kind of silly to not go that way. And then really the only one left from that group is Brandt Clark. And I think he was, a little more hyped up previously. I think he sort of dropped a little bit. And I think that's going to hang on. I think there might be some teams, higher up in the draft that might have, maybe he didn't drop as far. So I do think it's a pretty good chance that they're all gone. However, if one of them does drop, right? I mean, we're talking about guys who are basically ranked in the top 6. We've seen people drop 3 spots before in the draft, and it happens all the time, right? You had Arizona jumping up to pick Hayton, Barrett Hayton, and then that let Hughes drop to the Canucks, and that was huge for the team, right? So if you have, if the Canucks maybe really like Brandt Clark, then I'd say there's a reasonable chance that he falls. Maybe like a 30% chance that he falls down, right?
Yeah.
Because it just takes a couple of other teams to have maybe like a Kent Johnson hire, because we've heard lots of good things about him. And then, that just pushes everyone down just a little bit and gives you the chance to pick someone better.
Love your point, and I love the potential. You're right. Barrett Hayton 2018, Maurice Sider 2019. No one expected him to go as high as he did, right?
Yeah, Sider was crazy.
So, yeah, there's always, and then last year we didn't even pick the third round, so who cares? So you're exactly right, though, because all it takes is for a surprise pick. There's that goaltender, Jesper Wallstad, that some are saying could be a top 10. But it's really funny how we both admit that prospects aren't our cup of tea. We can learn about them. We can learn about them quickly. But as soon as we knew we were locked in at 9, boom, we're kind of looking around trying to learn about these top 9 guys, right?
Well, and I mean, and you mentioned the goalie there. You mentioned Jesper Wallstedt, I guess his name is. Haven't done a ton of research, but I mean, you look at the teams picking ahead of Vancouver, right? You got Detroit, but they don't really have a goalie of the future. San Jose is a disaster in net. LA, after Jonathan Quick, is, he only has a couple of years left probably, right? Like one of those teams, if they think this is a future number 1 guy, like Spencer Knight last year or the year before, whichever that was, then, I not too crazy to think that one of them might go up, especially if like their goalie coach, is maybe really high on a guy. I'm sure he would have a say in that. And, and again, you get one of those moving up, you have, like a Kent Johnson moving up, and then, one of those D-men are basically right there for the taking at 8 and then maybe 9.
Exactly. And for those of you, oh, by the way, C Edits and Fangirl said they never golfed before, so they might be the ideal partner for you to even it out. But we'll get to that later. So we talk about these big 4D, and then there's this thought that this guy named Matthew Beniers is going to be the other top 2 pick. So really, you mentioned a couple of these guys, whether it's Kent Johnson, who's actually from the North Shore, whether it's a guy named Gunther. What's his first name?
Dylan
Gunther. And then I know there's that there's Mason McTavish, and then there's that other kid. Is it William Eklund from Sweden? So those are kind of like the 5 forwards with the 4D. And then you're right, throw in Jesper Wallstedt, and there's probably your top 10, barring a surprise pick or 2. Yeah, you got it. Yeah, I'm excited. And we've talked here before, Parker, about you can't really say the Canucks have a huge need because they need everything. They could still use top 6 scoring. They could still use bottom 6 depth. They could use a great, top 4 D-man. So the only place they probably don't have to look is in goal with Demko, DiPietro, and Seelovs. Yeah.
And whether it's, even if you're getting a guy who you can maybe slot in as a middle 6 forward, next year, like that's a big addition. I think picking 9, you might not get a guy who's going to slot in this year, but you might, right? They're going to come to camp. They're going to get a shot. And I'm of the sort of impatient mind at this point. I'm like, well, if the Canucks are going to try to do something, let's get a guy who's going to play this year because it's fun, right? We're going to have Pud Colson slotting into the lineup this year. Maybe like a Lockwood or someone like that, Rathbone coming in and playing more games. I'm just give us more fun at this point, because my thoughts, my dreams for this season aren't super high. So let's get all the fun in there that we can. And if that's new players and new, young, exciting players, then that works for me.
Let's be realistic. Let's have fun, because the next summer is going to be really fun when Roussel, Beagle, Eriksson, Holtby, and recapture penalty come off the books. $20 million. That's going to be fun.
Yeah, that will be good. And then 2 years after that, when the cap starts to go up again, will be nice as well. But yeah, I mean,
that'll be fun.
Hopefully we're going on the upslope here. And I mean, I think I speak for everyone. I hope this is the last time we're talking about a top 10 pick for a while. Let's get some good competitiveness. And you know what? Maybe we aren't talking about a top 10 pick this year. Maybe the Canucks do make a move. What are your thoughts on, some potential there?
Yeah, it's funny. I was going to ask you the same thing, and we didn't even compare notes before we started talking, because we both showed up like 3 minutes before we were supposed to. Just kidding. You were here at least 5 minutes early. But I'm of the mind, I don't think you trade this pick. For me, maybe they're not about pleasing me, but last year, because we didn't pick into the 3rd round and we picked Joni Jarmo, the Finnish defenseman, right? Like Olli Levy part 2. I was pretty disinterested in last year's draft, to be honest with you, Parker. And again, they're not doing this to entertain Clay Emo, but I think when you look at, and I think we've talked about this, the fact that the Rathbones, Podkolzins, and Hoglanders are up with the main club, and we expect them to fully make the team. Then when you look at the prospects, it's not that great. There's DiPietro, there's maybe an Aiden McDonough, maybe a Jet Wu and Lockwood Lynn Gadjevich, but they're okay. But none of those guys are franchise changers or even game breakers. So maybe I would keep number 9. I wouldn't even entertain trading down. I want to keep that top 10 pick and start to slowly build. But you're right. If this guy comes in and potentially even surprisingly makes the lineup, then that's awesome. But I think given our track record, given the way we develop our guys, I think we realistically got to look at waiting for one more year for this player to actually come in the lineup.
Yeah, and that's the thing about when your prospects do graduate, right? You just start to run out of them. The issue with the Canucks having their prospects graduate is that they're graduating and the Canucks are still they still have a lot of work to do, right? And a big thing for playoff teams is having players who are cost controlled going into those playoff runs, right? If you can have a Vasily Podkolzin who maybe 2 years from now is like a 50-point player and making less than $1 million a year, right?
Yep.
So much value. That opens up so much potential for your team. But if you start trading away these guys and just have empty cupboards, and then, you're basically having, that's the other thing about it, right? Like if they were to say trade the 9th overall pick and get like a 26-year-old player who's really good, right? Well, you're really putting a window on yourself, right? Like you're really tightening the gap. It's like, all right, well, you guys got like 4 years now. Right. Like that is now your window, because you're not going to have a prospect graduating a year from now, cost controlled, who might make a really good impact. You have this guy who's going to start declining in 3 or 4 years, and who knows what kind of contract he's on. And it's just, it's not even a win now move. It's a win enough games to make the playoffs now move. And then probably lose in the first round anyways, because you put this team against a Colorado or Vegas, and it's going to be a bloodbath.
Well, I know we're going to talk about those teams later, but that series is amazing. Are you worried though? You bring a great point, Parker. Are you worried, given that we know not so much Travis Green, because he can only coach the players that he has. He's not the one making trades. Are you worried that Jim Benning, whether it has to do with the draft or free agents, are you worried that he is going to go to win now mode, given that he's got 2 years left on his contract, and he's already said that the stated goal is to make the playoffs this upcoming season?
I have never stopped being worried. And I mean, we think about it, right? Like, what is Jim Benning has always said, I want to get more draft picks. That's my specialty, is drafting. And then, the proof's in the pudding, and he just hasn't, right? From year one, every move that has been made has been to compete as soon as possible, right? It's been, we're going to turn this team around quick and make the playoffs. It didn't work. And now we're looking at it now, and it's like, all right, well, let's turn it around quick and make the playoffs. And I don't think you can't go into a full rebuild again. Let's be real. Because I mean, it just wouldn't work. But I mean, we're talking about, it's just going to, like, I don't even know what to say. Like, I don't have the trust. I think the fact that it's such a tight window of, okay, we need to start making moves to make the playoffs. But the problem is the moves that help you make the playoffs, free agency, which has been a disaster, and trades, which have been fine, I would say. Yeah. Lots of misses, some good hits, kind of 50-50, right? Basically every trade that gets made is like you hear like, oh, the Canucks have made a trade, or it's like, Canucks trade for X player and the return hasn't come out yet, and you're just like, okay, please have made a good deal. Like, you never know, right? Meanwhile, if you're a fan of like Colorado and you hear that Sakic has made a trade, you're like, oh, this is probably good for us, right? Like, yeah, exactly. And it is every time.
The rich get richer.
Yeah. So, you have GMs who are good at certain things, and I just don't really see the potential really for Jim to sort of turn it around and be the one that can put the pieces around this core and really build that contender, just because he hasn't proved it.
That's a very fair point. And Parker, when people ask me, how would you evaluate Jim Benning's tenure? You kind of hinted at this, but I always break it down. There's way more than this. And this is admittedly an oversimplification, but I always break it down into drafting, trades, and free agency. And drafting, I'd say overall, it's been good. Like overall, because you look at Hughes, Pettersson, Besser, Podkolzin, Hoglander, Demko. There's a lot of good. Rathbone. There's a lot of good there. So let's say I give the drafting a passing grade. I give his trades kind of. You hinted at it, kind of even. There's been some good ones where we've McCann for Garanson bad, but Garanson turned to Pearson good. The trades actually for Levo was pretty good. You know, those kind of depth forwards.
Move.
And then you're right. You go into free agency, and that's where it either letting guys go. And I know we're going to talk about two of them in different parts of the show, whether you're letting guys go or you're signing guys to big contracts. So that's a failing grade. So that's why I always say he's kind of like right in the middle. I say his drafting's good, his free agency's bad, and his trades are kind of neutral. Granted, there are way more elements to running a team, but that's kind of like my very oversimplified look at things.
Yeah, and the thing is, like, I can concede that Jim Benning is an average GM, and I think that's at best. But let's say he's middle. Let's say he's the 16th best GM in the league. Well, the goal is to have the best team in the league, right?
Yeah.
So the 16th best GM isn't going to cut it. If we're going to try to, if you want to win a Stanley Cup, you probably need like a top 6 GM. Because really, you see teams like Colorado, which are built for, like, they are built to win, right? But if you think about the long term, right? How long is a Stanley Cup window? 4 years, maybe?
Yeah, if that. Yeah.
And then you make the playoffs and you have to win, 4 straight series, best of 7s. Your odds of winning aren't higher than 25% each year, right? So even the best teams, the best assembled teams, most of them don't win, right? Like most teams don't win in their windows. And we saw it with Washington. In Washington's window, they didn't really win, right? They won it like a year after everyone expected their window to end. And we saw obviously Vancouver 10 years ago, right? That team was built to win, and it didn't happen. And we see it time and time again where, the best teams don't always win, but you got to give yourself the best shot possible.
Yeah, fascinating point about window and things, because I've seen arguments where Washington, it took a while for the Ovechkins and the Backrooms of the world to mature, and then they were good. You're right, for that small window, and they won one. Pittsburgh, you could say they're in the middle. Like Crosby was good early, but it took a while for that team to mature. But then you look at a team like Chicago, who did it while Taves and Kane were quite young. So there's no magic formula that says all you guys got to be 25 and older, because Chicago proved against that. But there is something to be said about there has to be some maturity. But you look at the teams, and I know we're going to talk about these juggernauts in Tampa and Vegas and Colorado. Vegas got good really quick. It's I'm envious, man. That's what I am. I'm envious. When I see the level of hockey that's being played in the playoffs, the Canucks would get crushed out there.
And that's the thing, right? Like you again, I keep going back to Colorado, but you look at Colorado and they're so well built, and it's like, they still have to get through. I mean, if Boston had made it, that would be a tough matchup. Tampa Bay, Vegas, like there's more than one good team at a time, right? Like if Toronto had made it forward, we'd have been like, okay, Toronto might put up a decent fight against Colorado. Now I think in the next round it's going to be, Colorado, Montreal, or Vegas, Montreal. And I think either way you go, it's going to be a disaster. But it's I don't know. I feel like if we go back to sort of our original point, which was like about potentially trading the 9th pick, I think it's just it's such a window condensing move, and that's sort of what we're trying to get at here is you only get a few chances. Your window is only X amount of time, and you want that window to be as big as possible because you need as many shots as you can get to potentially win a Stanley Cup. And giving yourself a 2 or 3 year window, even if you made the best team in the NHL, you just have to lose one series each year, right? Like that's all it takes.
Yep. You're right. I know we're 7 minutes early, but trading your top 10 pick for a chance to maybe make the playoffs and shorten your window, don't do that.
Don't do that.
Don't do that.
It's short-sighted. And I mean, of course it depends on the return, right? Like if we're talking about like a really, really good player, then okay, sure, right? Like a good young player, but I don't think that's what you're getting for 9, right? You're probably getting a guy in his mid-20s, like mid to late 20s. That
Parker, I heard, the one other podcast I do listen to that's not ours. Well, sorry, I better, just in case anyone's listening, I do jump in and out of other podcasts, but the one I do listen to, Vancast, as you know, and Thomas Drance and Jeff Passan made the point that the only trade for like a top 10 pick for player, the only one they can think of in the recent history is Schneider for the 9th overall pick that turned into Horvat. They're basically saying you rarely see a top 10 pick traded for just a player straight up. It's always this pick plus a player equals this player, or this pick plus another pick plus a prospect equals a player. So I'm agreeing with you that we shouldn't expect, and that's why it's rarely done. Is how, because the GMs are they know exactly what you're saying is you're rarely going to get equal value back if you trade away your top 10 pick.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, like Jeff Carter was one in 2011. Ruslan Fedotenko in 2002 for the 4th overall pick. But yeah, like it doesn't happen a lot, right? And I mean, Fedotenko was only like 23 at the time. So again, if you're getting like a young, good player, then sure, it makes sense. But like, as you said, if you go back and you redo that, like that Schneider for Horvat trade, like, yeah, Schneider was an excellent goalie. But that he didn't last long, right? Like Schneider was what, like 28 at the time, 27 maybe.
Yeah.
And you're at that point where you're at the risk of a decline. No matter how good a player is at 28 years old, they could be 2 years away from just a steep cliff. I mean, think of Louis Eriksson, right? He goes in at the age of 29, puts up 30 goals. And the Canucks like, oh, here's $36 million. And then he hasn't even scored that many in the 6 years since, or in the 5 years since, whatever it's been. But like, declines happen and they can be dramatic. And I don't think, I don't think you risk it giving up your 9th pick.
Great point. Let's do 5 minutes on the World Championships before we take our mid break. What do you think? Were you impressed? Were you happy? How are you feeling?
Yeah, so I'll be honest, World Championships, didn't watch much of it. I saw that they had lost the first 3 games, like, wow, that sucks. And then I just stopped paying attention. And then I saw on Twitter, I think the semifinal game was at like 4 a.m. So I was like, I'm not watching that. And then, so I saw all the updates as they went. And then I knew they're in the gold medal game yesterday. And yesterday, I'm golfing again yesterday. And it was kind of in the morning. And I'm like just on Twitter, just like walking up the fairway, and I look and I'm like, oh, they're in overtime. So I pull it up on my phone because it's 3-on-3. Yeah. 3-on-3 international hockey overtime, like on the big ice. Like I'm like, all right, I'm watching this. And they scored within like a minute of when I turned it on.
Yes, it's good.
But no, like it's great that they won. Good for Roberto Luongo, GM of that team. Yeah. Now, being the GM of an international Canada team I could do that. Right. I mean, you just pick the best players, really. Right. There's no trade story about, no contract story about, right. It's like, let's just assemble a good team, call some guys, say, hey, you want to come to Latvia? And then you bring them out. Gerard Gallant, though, I mean, obviously without a coaching gig right now after a couple of rough stints. And he goes out and, loses 3 games at the start of the championship. I'm sure some people are thinking, wow, maybe he just doesn't have it anymore. And this Canada team clearly doesn't have it, because this is Canada's like D team, basically. You have basically the Sens second or third line out there scoring goals for them. And but yeah, battled back, won every game that they needed to after losing the first 3. And that definitely speaks volumes.
Yeah, what's crazy is you're right. They lost the first 3. They actually needed help to get into the actual next round. There's some Latvia game where something happened, but it worked out. Then in the quarterfinal, that one went to overtime, and that's the one where Stecher made that amazing play, that toe drag move to set up. I think it was Mangiapane. Yep. Yeah, and the Canuck killer. And then you're right, the 4:00 semifinal against the U.S. And then this gold medal game, which was pretty crazy. Stecher on the ice for the game winner as well. Although it was the 2 Ottawa forwards, as you mentioned, who made the really good play. And I'm 0% the type who's crying that Troy Stecher left. I like him because he's from Richmond. I like him because he was effective. I understand what happened with the negotiation. So for me, it's not even about, imagine what he would look like on our right side. No, I'm past that. I'm just happy for him. I'm happy for him. Yep. I'm happy for Mikey DiPietro, who's Canucks property, didn't get a chance to play as a third goaltender. I'm happy for Luongo. So there's either former or ex-Canucks. There was some Canuck content on that team, and that's why I'm happy.
Yeah, and I mean, there's been a lot of discourse the last couple of days about the whole, like, would you rather have Stecher or Myers, even barring contract? And at the end of the day, like, let's say they had brought back Troy Stecher. Is Troy Stecher really that important of a piece to a Stanley Cup contender? Like, look, right now, Troy Stecher would be great. But if the Canucks are competing for a Stanley Cup, like Troy Stecher is not a huge piece, right? Like we'd be a 6-7 at best on a true Stanley Cup contender. Now he played for Vancouver in a very low skid for this team, and now he's in Detroit, where Detroit's basically a disaster still. You know, so I mean, like he's a good defenseman. He's effective, but like you compare that to like a Travis Hamonic from this year, right? And at the end of the day, if you're competing for a Stanley Cup, that's not a piece that's going to put you over the top, right? At the end of the day, I think it's just so much getting worked up over nothing for no real reason.
I agree with you. And the other thing I want to say is Owen Power, who played with Troy Stecher for a lot of that tournament. And you've mentioned him as the number 1 overall pick. He actually was pretty good in the game. I didn't watch a lot, but in the games that I watched, I was quite impressed with his confidence for such a young player. I think he knows he's going to go number 1. Troy Stecher even tweeted as much. Yep. But I do like his game. Very composed. You know, there are a couple of plays that he made in the gold medal game, which he tried one bad pass from his behind his own net. So maybe that's whether not so much nerves. I think that's just more of an experience thing, or maybe an overconfidence thing. But overall, I liked what I saw. Not overly flashy, but solid. And I think a guy with speed who can skate. A guy with size who can skate. So excited. Canucks won't get him, but it'll be that experience will only do work wonders for him going forward.
At the end of the day, it's an 18-year-old kid getting real adult experience, right? The highest level he's played at is in college. Which, there's some bigger guys there, right? There's guys that are like 21, 22 in college. Yeah. But you're getting a chance to play against real NHL players and play with real NHL players, right? Not saying like Troy Stecher's a veteran or anything, but he's played, for a while in the NHL. I'm sure he's got valuable insight for the guy. So at the end of the day, great experience for him. It'll definitely help him going forward. And just glad that they were able to pull out a win.
What's the most exciting thing you did as an 18-year-old? Granted, that was only 4 years ago, or 6 years ago.
I made a lot of pizzas in my Panago days. Not a lot exciting as an 18-year-old.
And I can't remember back then because we didn't have cameras or any types of ways to keep memories. So I'll have to plead the fourth or fifth or whatever the thing is on that one.
We don't have that in Canada anyways. That's fine.
That's true. Yeah. Trying to quote an American law. Don't do that. So, or American tenant. So we're at the halfway point, Parker. Should we invite some submissions from people?
Absolutely. If you guys have your don't do that's of the week, that's the segment we're doing every week at around 10:30. We're about halfway through. So if you guys have some don't do that's in this one, then feel free to shoot them our way. And maybe while we wait for some of those to come in, I'll read another Apple Podcast review from Margie with 4 E's. Left a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts saying, "Great podcast. This podcast is amazing. If you love the Canucks, Clay and Parker are truly passionate about the Canucks. They are able to discuss and provide valuable insight on major events involving the Vancouver Canucks. It's very fortunate to have discovered Clay and Parker's channels a couple months ago, and the collaboration is remarkable, especially since they only started in April. Keep up the great work, Parker and Clay." Now, one thing, thank you very much. That's very kind. And I do like that you said Canucks a bunch of times in there. That's great for the keywords, I'm sure, for the keyword searches. But no, that's very kind. Thank you very much.
5 stars and 4 E's. That's pretty good for 3 months for 2 of us. See what I did there? That's pretty good, eh? 5, 4, 3, 2.
Yep.
And number 1 podcast in Taiwan for a bit.
A little 5, bit. 4, 3, 2, I think 1. We had 2 days, maybe 1.
All right, what do we got for don't do that?
See it. I mean, I guess we're gonna relive this one, and we can segue this into this afterwards. But letting Toffoli walk when he's only a phone call away, don't do that. And I mean, scored the OT winner tonight for the Habs, making just $4.25 a year. That's gonna hurt for a while.
Fangirl winning the draft lottery 2 or 3 years in a row. Don't do that. Well, actually, I wouldn't mind doing that. I just
that'd be good for us.
Try and pick better. Yeah, but that's fair. And
well, now
Justin Credible. Yeah,
they're changing the rules next year to go against that. But
yes, and Justin Credible, 65% of fans who answer Stecher is a better player than Myers with salary out. Don't do that. So kind of speaking to your point.
Now this was a weird conversation because I thought about it and I was like, okay, so if you take the contracts out of the equation, which is hard, everyone's got that bias built into their minds, right? Mm-hmm. And I tend to think that Myers is probably better than Stecher. However, I saw some analytics get tweeted out that really say the opposite. And I like analytics. I'm an analytics guy. That sort of swayed me a little bit. So I think at the end of the day, again, I think both of them you probably don't want on a Stanley Cup contender. The Canucks are gonna if the Canucks are a Stanley Cup contender, they're gonna have Tyler Myers to deal with. So at the end of the day, that's all I got there.
I like Lucas's here. He says going from sweeper to getting swept, i.e. the Jets. Don't do that. Yeah. Although I guess the Jets finished the playoffs 4-4.
Yeah, no, we do have there's the potential here, and there was the potential for, I don't remember what the exact term is, but Down Goes Brown, part of the Athletic, has a term for this that I don't remember. But basically it is the team, like a team sweeps a team in round 1, then gets swept in round 2, and then they get swept in round 3, and then they get swept in the finals. Now this happened almost last year. If I can, I'm just going to look up NHL
Sure.
playoffs.
I'll read a couple more. Don't do that. So while you do that, see what I did there? Time for hockey. I know he loves McTavish. Not picking McTavish at 9 if he's available. Don't do that. And then he also says, Parker, not making a mock draft. Don't do that. So you got a fan there.
I guess I got to get to work, hey?
Yeah. And, don't. Johnny Canuck, don't apply to Naked and Afraid pretending to be Clay. Or maybe he's saying apply to Naked and Afraid pretending to be Clay. Don't do that. Yes, we had a fun talk about what reality shows I'd be good at. And unfortunately, Naked and Afraid came up more than once. But we'll move along to keep our G rating.
What I was referencing, so in 2019, the playoffs, Columbus swept Tampa in the first round. And then the problem is Boston beat Columbus 4-2 in the next round. But if it had gone the other way, if say Boston, okay, and then it went Boston, Carolina in the third round. But if Boston hadn't, sorry. Let's go on the other side. The Islanders swept Pittsburgh in the first round. Carolina swept the Islanders in the second round. Boston swept Carolina in the third round. And then St. Louis beat Boston in 7. So if St. Louis had swept Boston in the final, it would have been 4 sweeps down the line there, which unfortunately, but yeah, so that's got potential this year, right? We had, does that have potential this year? What was the first round? Oh yeah, the Jets swept Edmonton. And then Montreal swept the Jets. And now in
Vegas
theory,
or Colorado could easily,
definitely could sweep Montreal, and then it would go down to, you'd have to have like the Islanders sweeping one of them or something, or Tampa Bay sweeping one of them, which I think is less likely. But it's possible at the end of the day. Again, just a little tangent, but
no, I love it. And I think that's a good segue. Thank you for the don't do that. So we'll okay. And this one, because I referenced your video, hitting a player after they scored a goal. Don't do that. I.e. Scheifele from Petter Hughes. Yes.
Yeah, that was an interesting one. It's still getting comments like to this hour from salty Jets fans now that they've been swept. Sorry.
Let's start there. Let's start there. Scheifele in that series make a difference? Or not?
Probably a little, but at the end of the day, I mean, like, I don't think one player is flipping 3 games, right? Maybe it's 3-1 right now, the series, if Scheifele plays every game. But I think one player probably only makes like a 3 to 4% difference at best.
Dubois did nothing. There's a lot of Winnipeg Jets who didn't do anything.
No. Really, and the Jets don't have a ton of stars, right? Scheifele is one of their few players who can go out there and score and go out there and work and get pucks and make a big difference, right? And they have Connor and Ehlers that can score. Wheeler, of course, is decent as well. But Scheifele was a big part of that, right? And you lose your number 1 center, it's not going to help. And he made a bad decision. It cost his team, and he didn't play again after that.
Are there anything else stand out to you? Were you surprised that, despite the absence of Scheifele, how easily it seemed easy that Montreal handled Winnipeg? Yeah,
and I mean, kind of. At the end of the day, I really assumed it would come down to a battle of the goaltenders, and Carey Price was excellent, which is so weird because he's so bad during the regular season. Like, he was a 901 in the regular season, right? Like, that's a low end starter. Which is why I kind of gave that edge to the Jets. And I said that in my second round predictions video, is I said, I think it's going to come down to Price versus Hellebuyck. And I think I give the edge to Hellebuyck right now, right? It's not 2015 anymore. And I was wrong about that. And, you know, I still sort of stand with what I said, right? Given all of the information we had at the start of the series, we're talking about two goalies who have been excellent in the clutch, right? Price has been known for his, you know, one game you need a save. Price is your guy. I did some math. Hellebuyck's been in 4 must-win games. Like if they lose, they're eliminated. He had a .941 save percentage across those 4 games. So at the end of the day, you need a goalie to make some saves for you. Pretty much a wash when it comes to those games. And then you look at the regular season this year and sort of the trend of Carey Price versus Hellebuyck being younger. You know, I went with Hellebuyck. I was wrong. Yeah, but I think with the information I had, you know, whatever.
Yeah, I know. I like Hellebuyck too. You guys, you know how much I like the Jets. You know how much I like him because of his work with Dusty. But one thing that stood out to me, and I haven't seen a lot of people talk about this, is the youth of the Montreal Canadiens. When you have Nick Suzuki and you have Cole Caulfield and you have the guy whose name I can't say, Kanyemi, those 3 guys alone. Yeah, thank you. With the stutter, 3, you know, all 3 of those guys playing in the top 9, I think, in Montreal. And when you look at Winnipeg's guys, well, hardly any forwards were effective, but maybe they didn't have that youthful energy, that almost carefree, never been in the playoffs like this before kind of attitude. I think it served Montreal well, and they just seem to be the more energetic team. So even a great goalie like Hellebuyck couldn't do everything on his own, and he just had an average series, right? Oh no, he was fine. He was fine, but he didn't get enough help.
Yeah, and I mean, it's all about, you know, they were kind of too ignorant, like the young players, right, to know any better, right? They just went out there and they played. They didn't feel the must-win pressure, because at the end of the day, Montreal's playing with house money at this point, right? They were supposed to get crushed by the Maple Leafs. You know, lots of people didn't have them even making the top 4 in the division, right? Maybe being around that 4-5 spot. They made the playoffs in that 4th seed. They took out Toronto. They were down 3-1 in the series. They were completely written off. And then they went out and they won it. And then even you go into being up 2-0 in the series, let's say, again, playing with house money, right? We got nothing to lose at this point. Well, now they're off to the 3rd round against a team that, like, whether it's Colorado or Vegas, they have no right to be in the same arena as, basically, in the 3rd round. And we'll see if that carries forward, right? I mean, they've defied the odds at every step of the way. I do think this sort of luck is not luck, but, you know, this energy that they have, it's going to run out, right? Especially against Vegas, I would say, like, sort of just a big bodying team. But I think Colorado would just skate circles around them anyways.
Good. Let's move to Colorado, Vegas. I admit, Parker, when I saw Colorado dismantle the Vegas Golden Knights
Game
7-1.
Yep.
And what was crazy is these teams tied in points for the regular season. Colorado won on the tiebreaker. They won the President's Trophy, but that means Vegas tied them in points. They're just as good. And then the Colorado, you know, closer game in Game 2. But then it's crazy. Like, I watched Game 4. The Golden Knights made Colorado look slow. They made them look discombobulated, disorganized. And yes, these two teams are so good. And it's, you know what it's like? I was telling this to my sons. It's like in roller hockey when you go to the game early, or you come out of the dressing room after game and you watch the 2 best teams in the highest tier play. Like, that's what it kind of looked like compared to, like, say, the teams that I'm on. And that's what I'm watching. When I'm watching Vegas and Colorado, I'm watching the speed, the aggression, the goal scoring, the goaltending, all those things. It's like ramped up, even compared to Montreal, Winnipeg. It seems like it's ramped up a little bit.
It's not even, it's not even the same sport that they're playing.
It's crazy. And that's why I agree with you. I think that, you know, with all respect to Montreal, I think they're going to have trouble with whoever wins this series. I don't know who it's going to be now that it's a best of 3, basically. Each home team has won twice. So, that's maybe because of that, the Colorado will squeak this out. But it's been amazing. It's been wonderful hockey to watch.
Yeah, I think Montreal is kind of in the same spot that the Canucks were last year, right, in the playoffs, where it's like, hey, the Canucks went out and they beat Minnesota as they were supposed to. They kind of upset St. Louis in round 1, and then they went up against this Vegas team, and yes, the Canucks took it to 7 games and whatever, but the Canucks had no right to be in Game 7 against Vegas, right? Like, like if you look at the shots and the expected goals metrics and all this stuff, that series should have been over in 5. But the Canucks had a goalie who just wouldn't let a puck go in, which you're allowed to have, but it's not something you can't rely on your goalie going 975 throughout the playoffs so you can win a Stanley Cup, right? You're just not going to be able to do that. And, you know, they obviously couldn't get it done in Game 7. And I think, you know, that's sort of a testament to how far the Canucks need to go and how far, you know, teams like the Habs are going to need to go if they want to compete with, you know, this sort of other tier that it seems that, you know, the Colorado and Vegas are playing on.
Yeah. So forget about whatever predictions we made prior to this series. Is it still the same for you? Best of 3, who wins? I'm still taking Colorado in 7.
So am I.
Yeah,
I think Colorado's looked kind of shaky the last couple of games. Yeah. I like, yes, Vegas has been really good. I think Colorado has just been playing a lot worse as well. If Colorado can just get back to their level and start playing sort of that carefree hockey they were playing in that 7-1 win, then I do see them winning it. Again, though, you know, I think a big factor, even if, let's say, Colorado gets back up to their level, we're still talking about Marc-Andre Fleury, you know, who might win the Vezina this year, that they have to get past. And I think, you know, they probably have the edge in net. So all things equal, I'd give the edge to Vegas. However, I don't think things are equal. So I give the edge to Colorado.
Okay. Speaking of not being equal, the Islanders take a 3-2 series lead on Boston today. I admit, Parker, of the 4 series, this is the one that I'm probably the least interested in, just because, I don't know, I'm not interested. But close games, all of them. They're all very close games.
And this is the one I've been the most wrong about, I think. Actually, Winnipeg Montreal I was pretty wrong about, but that one I kind of saw it going, like, I thought every game would be close. So honestly, the fact that Montreal won doesn't surprise me. The fact it was in 4 kind of does. I really thought Boston was going to be just the much better team against the Islanders. There's something about the Islanders that they don't seem good, yet they keep winning. And this, I don't get it. I don't know what it is that they're doing, but it just seems like other teams are sort of playing down, and they just play this shutdown game that somehow keeps guys like Marchand and Pasternak and Bergeron from just putting up 6 goals a night. Like, I watch the games, I don't see it. Like, I don't get what's going on here. It's a weird mystery. It's like the Twilight Zone that these guys are in, that they're playing in. And, you know, I guess the Islanders could beat anybody, right? Like, I mean, they're taking Boston, who looked really good in round 1, to the brink of elimination here. That's going to go on Wednesday, the finale, or potentially the finale for that series. Just wild, to me.
And we talked about it last week, how the Islanders are, aside from Matthew Barzal, have all these nondescript players, right? The Josh Baileys and the Brock Nelsons and the Jean-Gabriel Pageaus and the Anthony Beauvilliers. There's all these guys that they're fine as players, but they don't scream superstar. They don't even.
There's no flash there. There's no sizzle. It's just it's all steak, no sizzle. It's just guys who can just go in there and get things done, apparently.
Yep, you're right, but they get the job done. And that leads us to the last, wow, what a crazy second period. An 8-goal second period in one of the games between Tampa and Carolina. Tampa's at 3-1 now, right? They're on the verge.
3-1. Yeah. We'll see that one go tomorrow at 3:30 Pacific time. Yeah, that was a wild one. Lightning were up 1-0 after 1. Both teams score 4 in the second, and then Lightning win the third period 1-0, and they go home with a win. And yeah, I don't really know what happened there, especially, you know, Tampa scores 3 goals in the last 5 minutes of the period to take the lead back. It's weird, right? Because you look at Nedeljkovic, who had a great season. You look at Vasilevsky, who's an excellent goalie. These teams shouldn't be scoring 10 goals in a game, but they did, I guess, in that one on Saturday.
And Kuch has been amazing. He's got 17 points, right? He's leading the NHL playoff scoring race by a few points. So him and Stamkos, you know, it was almost like 2 free agent pickups, like at the end of the year. You know, obviously it's not, but what a team,
I'd say. Yeah. I mean, I don't think Stamkos was much, you know, cap manipulation. There was a bit there, of course, but I think Kucherov was pretty clear. But again, hate the game, not the player at that point. You know, if Tampa Bay is going to do that, and they have every right to, that's the problem with the NHL, not with Tampa Bay. That's smart work by Julien Brisebois.
And just before we get into your questions, everyone, Parker, you referenced this, and I'm glad you brought it up. We've talked many times that there's no such thing as a Western Conference or an Eastern Conference. But we do know by Montreal, by virtue of them having the fewest regular season points out of everyone left, no matter who wins, you're right. They're going to come in as number 4, Vegas or Colorado, because they tied for President's Trophy points. They will come in as number 1. So we already know that that's the series. And then the winner of the other 2 series are going to meet in the other final.
So likely Tampa Bay against whoever.
Yep. You got it. And then Montreal, as we heard yesterday, will be able to host games at their arena. They do not have to get adopted by a U.S. city to play their games for the 3rd and 4th round if they make it, which is good news, obviously.
Great, especially if they can get some more fans in there. I mean, they had the one game with 2,500.
Yeah.
It didn't have a ton of life to it. Again, you're talking about a 19,000 seat, arena. It's sort of an echo chamber when you only have like 2,500 people in there, right? But if you can get that up to 7,000, right?
Yep.
Then you're starting to really make some noise in there, especially if you're getting, if you can get those tickets into the hands of some really rabid fans. Then, we're talking about, a potential difference maker, especially since they're going to have to go into Colorado or Vegas, for those games. And those are going to be almost sold out, right? I don't know if they're doing like 12,000 or whatever, but it's going to be a huge difference maker.
Yeah. Vegas is actually full arena. It's crazy.
And it looks like they got such a good show going on down there. So that's definitely going to be a tough one for Montreal, as if the odds weren't stacked against them enough.
Great point. So let's spend our last 10 minutes in the chat box, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
And here's a good question from Arcel. Who do you guys think will win the Selke this year? I think it's really close. I had to look it up, I had to have someone tell me that it's Bergeron, Barkov, and Stone.
So
for the Selke,
the same as every year.
Pretty much. and then my first reaction was it'd be cool Barkov one, right? He's kind of the younger one of those 3. But then I looked up the stats, Parker, and Barkov and Stone have way more points than Bergeron. Bergeron and Stone's plus minus are way better than Barkov's. Might be a bit because of the team, whatever. So Stone really has the best combination of points. I know it's best defensive forward, but they give it to guys who can score too. So Stone to me seems to be the odds on favorite only because of his plus minus, which speaks a little bit to defensive, awareness and his actual offensive point total. But I'd be happy if Barkov won, just someone younger, someone different.
Yeah, I think if I had to put money on someone, it would be Stone. But at the end of the day, like this is such a weird award that's kind of ambiguous. That it's just like, I mean, it could be Bergeron as well, or like it could be any of them. I don't know what the hockey writers are thinking when it comes to this. Lots of them are old hockey men who are going to see Patrice Bergeron and just be like, all right, that's my number 1. They literally look at plus minus and go off that. I think it should be Stone, but again, I haven't watched a ton of hockey outside the North this year, anyways.
Okay, that's good. Okay, a couple people asking for some Abbotsford talk.
Sure.
Yeah. And I think so Lucas just says Abbotsford thoughts, 68 game season for the AHL Pacific Division. AHL moving to a unified 72 game season when Palm Springs Kraken comes in the following year.
Yeah, and this is what we expected, right? That they'd go in that Pacific Division, which would be I got it pulled up here. Basically, Abbotsford, Bakersfield, Colorado, Henderson, Nevada, Ontario, California, San Diego, San Jose, Stockton, Tucson, right? So basically, it's a 9-team division. Basically, the entire West Coast. Everyone in basically BC South. Right at that point. It'll be good. Now there is rumors that Seattle, their team isn't ready, right? Their Palm Springs affiliate,
right?
And they're looking to make a deal with a team unknown at this point, on where to put their prospects and their backup players. And I think the rumor is the agreement needs to have room for like 12 of their players and a goalie, if I remember correctly. Obviously the people immediately think, oh, well, Abbotsford's a new team. Maybe they'll sort of merge with Vancouver. I think the issue there is the border, right? At that point, why wouldn't they partner up with a team that's on that side of the border? Now, Abbotsford's closer to Seattle than, the teams in California and Arizona. But I don't really know. I could see it. And it would put some money in the Aquilini's pockets. So again, I don't have any inside information. It could really be anybody. I don't want it to be, the Vancouver or the Abbotsford team. But I mean, another side of it is it would probably make that AHL team better, right? The team that had access to two teams prospects, and sort of second tier players, which might be good for Abbotsford, a fresh team. If they were competitive, right? Maybe they make the playoffs in the AHL. That would be good for business. At the other side of it, though, it's like, hey, well, now the players in your system are getting less playing time potentially. And that sort of, right? Like you don't want there to be, let's say Seattle has a really good third string goalie. You don't want him splitting games with DiPietro, right? You want DiPietro to play 45 of those 68 games, probably, right?
And we saw that. Yeah.
Go ahead.
And we saw that this year when Vancouver did St. Louis a solid, took some of St. Louis prospects onto Utica, and then they were fighting over who gets to play games, right? Like it was crazy.
Yeah. So at the end of the day, it's, there's reasons for it. There's reasons against it.
Yeah.
Purely hockey wise, probably not the best move. But business wise, I could see, good reasons, whether it's making the team more competitive for playoff run, and things like that. Then I could see it.
Yeah, I get a kick out of Ontario because it sounds like Ontario, but it's Ontario, California, and more importantly, to string a couple of ideas together. That's where my cousin Dusty was the goaltending development coach for LA. That is the LA Kings development. So you know how we were talking about with LA Draft Wallstead? Well, they have a guy, he's played a bit in the NHL named Cal Peterson, who they are really, setting up as the successor to Jonathan Quick, which is cool. But yeah, Ontario always has a soft spot for me because that's where Dusty played, and that's where he had to suit up to back up his son, Jonah. It's the first father-son goaltending tandem ever in pro hockey because all their main guys were injured or called up to the big club. It's pretty cool. That story came out about 4 or 5 years ago. So yes, a bit of Ontario Reign trivia for everyone out there.
Great. Now this is a fun one. Daniel Wagner put out an article today that I saw on Twitter as I was scrolling, and the title was pretty inflammatory. Where it was basically like, the Canucks should re-sign Brandon Sutter or something like that.
Wow,
this is a fun topic. What do you think the Canucks should entertain the idea of re-signing Brandon Sutter?
When I think of the word entertain, Parker, I think of bring a smile to someone's face. I think of lights. I think of fun. None of those things are Brandon Sutter, but in all seriousness,
that might be the meanest thing you've ever said about anyone.
but I am actually fine. I would entertain, in all seriousness, him coming up as a 3C. I would, but this is obvious, at a proper money amount, and that's the magic number, right? Because if you bring him in, he showed flashes. Yes, a hat trick, maybe in garbage time. Actually, I don't even know his garbage time. He was fine. He was fine last year. He was actually pretty good in the bubble too. I remember seeing remember doing some commentary on him there. So, but it's the money, right? We can't pay him whatever he made, 4.25 or 3.8, whatever. What did he make? Like 4, right? That's a lot.
4.375.
4.375. Okay, that's a lot of money for Sutter.
It's a lot.
But if he solidifies a bottom, but do you come back with Sutter, Podkolzin, and Mott as your third line? Like, no?
I disagree.
So you're not.
That's the one thing I disagree with. You mentioned as a 3C.
Yeah.
No, I don't want him to be an option. If the Canucks are considering having him as like, oh, he'll be our 4C, but he can fill in at 3C, then I say no. That's a problem if you're sort of relying on him as a fallback plan. And it's sort of the same thing I've thought about Alex Edler, right? Where, like, yeah, if you bring back Alex Edler, you're basically giving Travis Green the ability to play Alex Edler 25 minutes a night. And it's like, we need to be a little more creative here if we want to put a good team together. And that's the thing I think about Brandon Sutter. If you are bringing Brandon Sutter back to be your 4C, full stop, fourth line center, nothing more. Someone gets injured as your 3C, bring someone up from Utica or Abbotsford at this point. Brandon Sutter is nothing more than a fourth line center. Pay him $1 million a year. Fine by me. That's a good fourth line center at the end of the day. He's kind of old. You might want someone younger, but he can kill penalties. Fine 4C. That's all good and fine. But he should not be your 3C at any point. But yeah, he's good in the room. He's a fine fourth line center. He's a fine penalty killer. I think it's fine to bring him back as long as it's cheap.
Mm-hmm. Sutter and Beagle, I've been saying this for the past 2 seasons. They're quite redundant players. They're not exactly alike. They're not twinsies, but they kill penalties. They're not bad when they're on their game in the faceoff circle. They give you good, honest defensive effort, and they're slow. Like, so there's a bunch of stuff that they're kind of the same.
Yeah.
But yeah, I have time for your argument then. If we can find a 3C, whether that's Miller, which I don't agree with, or someone else.
Right. And if Beagle comes back though, and you're going to have Jay Beagle as your 4C because he's already under contract, then yeah, I don't see a spot for Sutter, right? Like I agree. You can only have one of them, in my opinion.
Exactly.
So, either get rid of Beagle, in some way if you're going to bring Sutter back, or don't bring Sutter back at all unless he's fine riding the bus in Abbotsford. Cause I think at the end, or sitting in the press box, a la Louis Eriksson. Because at the end of the day, I just don't think it's worth it to use up that money on the Canucks have much more pressing needs than their fourth line center. They have much bigger holes to fill. They have enough fourth line forwards.
So let's end with this one. Speaking of big decisions to make, Cianet's asked, do you think PD will make less than Matthew Barzal in his next contract? As we know, Barzal is 3 years at $7 million. So
yeah,
what says you, Parker? $7 million.
If we're talking 3 years, I think it'll be close. Maybe I don't think he'd make less. I
agree with you.
I think it would be close though. I mean, when was that signed? That was signed this year. So he was coming off of a 60 point in 68 game season.
Those are PD-like numbers.
Those are PD-like numbers.
Yeah.
And he is a center, but I think I don't know. I don't see him making less than that. I could see maybe 7.5 at 3 years. If it's 4 years, then it's probably a little bit more even. But yeah, I don't think it's I think it'll be close. I don't think he'll make less. If he makes less, then Jim Benning is doing some great work, and he's been great at RFA signings for the most part. I mean, look at Bo Horvat's contract, for example. But I don't think he'll make less though.
I agree with you. At the start of the season, before we saw how bad they were, the team was, and before everything happened with injuries to PD, I was thinking like 8 to 8.5 for PD, and then 6.5 to 7 for Quinn. I backed that down now. If it's a 3-year deal, right? Long term, it changes the numbers. But yes, I agree with you. I expect 7.5 for PD, roughly for 3, and for Quinn, the Werenskis and the McAvoys of the world, they're making 5.5. So I could see Quinn making maybe about 6 over 3, and that's the numbers I'm looking at: 7.5 and 5.5 to 6. But spitballing.
Yeah, and I mean, man, Charlie McAvoy's underpaid right now.
Yeah,
he is so good. I mean, yeah. Like people have mentioned, like the top 10 paid, like highest paid defenseman in the NHL. The top 10th is $8 million a year, right? So if you're gonna pay Quinn Hughes, close to 8, then is he a top 10 defenseman in the NHL? I don't.
Maybe not
yet. No, that's John Carlson. That's Oliver Ekman-Larsson, Thomas.
It's actually Cale Makar now.
Yeah, and I mean Thomas Chabot is, the shining light in Ottawa. Like that's why he's making that much. But I mean, you're looking at guys like, Aaron Ekblad makes 7.5. Guys like that, like Provorov's at just under 7. So,
what does Pietrangelo make? Is he on that list?
He might not be. He makes 8.8. For Vegas right now. But I mean, that's all UFA years, right? So it's a little bit different.
That's fair. And last point I'll make about that contract is, remember at the start of the year, we were talking about the big four of Makar, Hughes, Heiskanen, and Dahlin. They're all going to sign very similar contracts. I think Makar is going to get a little bit more than
Makar is just he is elevated. Makar is so good. It's ridiculous. And I think, when we were talking about the Calder last year and that sort of whole race, like I think him and like Makar and Hughes were pretty comparable. But Makar has, like, you watch him play and he is so dynamic. He is such a weapon on that Colorado power play and just on the blue line. He is like, he's got Norses in his future. Absolutely.
Yep. That's fair. Totally fair. Well, we're at 65 minutes. What do you say?
All right, I'd say we wrap up. I got a bed calling my name. It is a Monday night here. Of course, if you guys enjoyed the show, hit the like button, do all that good stuff. Hit subscribe. If you missed any part of the show, you can rewind back to the beginning here on YouTube. You can go find it right after the show, probably 35 minutes later on Spotify, and probably some point tomorrow morning, probably by the time you wake up tomorrow morning on Apple Podcasts and all the other ones. So they will be up there. And if you are listening to a podcast version of it, go over to Apple Podcasts, leave a review, 5 stars, and say hello, and we'll read it out on the show next week. Anyways, I think that's all we've got for this one. Thank you guys again so much for watching, and we'll see you next week.